So now we turn to Mikołaj Jan Piskorski, who obviously has a Polish name, but he's not joining us from Poland. He is a professor of strategy and innovation and the dean of IMD Southeast Asia and Oceania, based in Singapore. He's an expert on digital strategy, platform strategy, and the process of digital business transformation. He works with companies in various industries across the globe, supporting them through a digital transformation. Professor Piskorski's session is entitled Developing a Successful Digital Strategy, a Practical Guide. Professor Piskorski, over to you. Are you with us, Professor?
Hello, my name is Mikołaj Piskorski. I'm the Dean of IMD Business School, Southeast Asia. I'm also the Director of Digital Diploma, which we give out at IMD Business School upon taking many successful courses. The talk today is about developing a successful digital strategy. It's going to be a very practical guide. In many ways, it's going to be informed by many conversations that I've been having and many advisory projects that I've been involved in with numerous executives, numerous CEOs across the world as they've been seeking to develop their own digital strategy and transform the organization. And because I want to keep the things very practical, I would like to take you through two case studies. And these case studies are real digital transformation. And we've chosen these digital cases for you in order to illustrate some of the frameworks that we've been developing on the basis of research that we have done in order to help you put together a good digital strategy. Many digital transformations fail. Many of them fail because of execution, but many of them also fail because of failed digital strategies. So this talk is hopefully going to help you nail some of the best examples that we have and best frameworks that we have to help you develop that strategy. So we're going to start with a case study of Nike, and then we're going to go a case study of Bayer. One of them is going to be a case of B2C, and the other one is going to be a case of B2B. So both will be helpful to you, regardless of which type of business you're in. Both cases are cases of successful digital transformation, so hopefully they will inspire you as well to undertake digital transformations. And both will be actually take part of a 4 or 5 years, so obviously will not be very fast things. Nike has been at it for a very long time. Bayer is still in the middle of it, so you're also getting a little bit of a difference between what has already happened and what's happening as we speak. So let's start with Nike. Nike is a company that everybody knows. It's a product that everybody knows. And the company introduced its digital transformation despite the fact that they really didn't need to transform. After all, there hasn't been really a big software disruption to its own business. Shoes are shoes are shoes are shoes, so technically they could have done nothing. And yet they've actually undertaken a really big transformation and been very successful at this. At the beginning of the digital transformation, they were worth about $35 billion, and at its peak, they were worth about $120 billion in market value. Of course, not all of it was caused by the digital transformation, but of course, significant proportion of that was, so it'd be useful to see what's happened. Nike, as many of you know, is also one of the world's biggest advertisers. It spends $2.5 billion on advertising, and it used to spend most of this advertising on basically sponsoring athletes. But there came a point where these athletes were not doing things that they should be doing and using different substances they shouldn't be using. So those guys at Nike have actually taken the money away from that and reallocated it to digital. And they allocated it to typical digital marketing, or what we would consider to be now normal digital marketing, but they've also spent a fair amount of money on developing a Nike Plus ecosystem. So what I want you to do is just watch very quickly this video, which will show you what they've actually done with this money. It's about $1 billion that they spent overall over a number of years. So big investment. So really, as you watch this, pay attention to see if you actually like what they've done.
Runner, huh? Fantastic. Well, if you like running, you're going to love running with Nike Plus. Picture yourself out on a run. With Nike Plus, that run becomes an endless parade of information about you. How fast you're going, how far you've gone, how long you've been at it, how many calories you've burned. It's all there, which is awesome on its own. But when you download that run to Nike Plus, you get your doors blown off. You'll see every run you've ever done, all the details, the whole enchilada. Pull up maps of your runs. You'll know exactly where you got lost. Got any friends? Awesome, put them to work. They can cheer you on while you're running by posting comments to your Facebook page. Better yet, challenge them. If they're really your friends, they'll still talk to you while they're choking on your dust. Nike Plus recognizes and rewards you for your efforts.
I'm Allison Felix. Congratulations on your fastest 5K ever.
And when you're ready for your next challenge, Nike Plus will take care of that too. It'll create a training program for you and help you stay on the path to victory. See what I mean? Doors blown off. Now go grab your shoes, get yourself some Nike Plus, and let's get out there.
So one of the really interesting things that you probably have seen in this video is that those guys have spent a lot of money to build sensors. These sensors came in 3 different flavors. Some of these sensors were sensors in the phone using the GPS and accelerometer in the phone. Some of these sensors were products like fuel band, and some of these sensors sat on the shoe or inside of the shoe. Either way, regardless of the kinds of sensors that they shows, what you're seeing here is really deep understanding of what the client really fundamentally wants, right? So that's really great because, of course, Nike didn't have that information beforehand. And then Nike used that data to basically build a number of applications, and those applications gave users both the ability to find out about their own personal performance, but also they were able to find what their friends were up to and also connect to some of the strangers who were also running. And that was the platform functionality of this ecosystem. And not only was the platform directly sort of facilitating relationships between people, but it was also able to collect data on what users were doing and surfacing that data to others. So of course, great user benefits, right? Great motivational benefits for users, and users truly enjoyed this. This ecosystem was copied. You see many companies follow suit. Nike was definitely one of the first ones to have developed this, and the biggest one because of the sort of starting date. But what's really differentiates Nike from everybody else is what they were able to do with these data, right? And how they fundamentally use these data to change the way they operate. And there's a number of different ways in which that happened, but I want to highlight 3 which I find particularly relevant. So the first one is the digital transformation of marketing. So they've basically taken the data from the sensors and they fundamentally changed the way they market. The first thing that they've done is they moved from mass marketing, one-to-many, to very individuals one-to-one marketing. And why would you even care about one-to-one marketing? Well, there's at least 3 different problems that the one-to-one marketing solves for you. One, the really big problem, as you know, in marketing is advertising with the right product. So here on this picture you see 2 ladies, both of whom seem like they're sort of almost identical, right? And they might have even bought their shoes at around the same time, but of course they're very different because as you can see maybe from this picture, some of them, the one on the left is running on hard surfaces, the other one is running on soft surfaces. They might not know, of course, what kind of shoe is best for them, and Nike definitely does not know how they're using the shoe when they don't have a sensor. But of course, when they do have a sensor, what they can say is, hey, listen, we know what shoe is right for you, and they can provide them with the right shoe recommendation, right? And of course, the impact of that is huge. If a company recommends a product to you which is actually suited to what you need, perfect, right? Why wouldn't you take it? And then once you use it, it's probably better than if you just bought a random product. You're going to have a brilliant experience. You're going to come back and buy more. So that's the first thing. The second thing that many companies are dealing with is the question of not only the right product, but the right time, right? And usually it's very difficult to figure out when the customer is in the market looking for a particular product. And as a consequence, very often companies are just advertising broadly to anybody who wants to take the product, thereby wasting a lot of money. But here we have a clear signal about how much these women have been using the product. The one on the left has run 50 kilometers, the one on the right has run 800 kilometers. So immediately you know that you basically should not advertise to the left one, right? She's very unlikely to buy this product. The one on the right hand side is much more likely to buy the product. So you should basically advertise only to this one and use the information that you have on her usage to offer her a better shoe, right? So you can imagine immediately that you're going to save a tremendous amount of money, right? Because if you don't have to advertise to the one on the left, you only advertise to the one on the right. That's already cheaper. And so you're providing her with the right offering, you're going to do much better in the long term than you've ever done. And Nike has had tremendous success with using this approach in order to increase the sales without actually somewhat fundamentally changing their budget. So that's the first one. The second one, which I think is really, really important, is what they've done in their R&D, right? So what have they done in their R&D is basically use the data from the sensors to fundamentally find out what the user is doing with the product. And some of the fascinating findings that showed up were on the level of individual products, but there was also a number of really fascinating findings just in general about how people use this product as a category, right? So if you think about shoes, there's sort of two different things that you can do with a shoe, right? You can run in a running shoe, which is what it usually has been designed for, but you can also walk in this in the shoe. And what's really fascinating is the idea that in the past, Nike has had a suspicion that people do a lot of walking versus running, but now they've actually, with the sensor, found out that 95% of time spent in athletic running shoe is spent running rather than walking, right? So for years, these guys have been suspecting that this has been a problem, but now they know, right? And it actually fundamentally changed the company and changed the course of the company, because if you've seen what's been happening with Nike shoes over the last 5 or 6 years, you've noticed that they've become much more colorful, much more fashionable, but also if you actually look at the makeup of the shoe, the bottom of the shoe has become much softer, which means that Nike no longer thinks that you're running in the shoe. In fact, if you look at their R&D expenditure, it has been reduced dramatically at the bottom of the shoe, simply because they've been over-investing in the walking element rather than a running element, right? So for walking, you don't need lots of cushioning, so why invest a lot of money there? But what you do see them invest a lot of money in is the right-hand side, sorry, not the right-hand side, the top side, which is the sort of the durability for a walking shoe, right? And again, as a consequence of this, Nike has been able to grow their business tremendously, right? Open up a completely new category of business, right, which has been sort of sitting in front of them, sitting in front of their nose. So it's the same kind of product, but slightly adjusted to really fulfill the needs that the customer is using the shoe for, and growing the business quite dramatically, right? So what do we see here is a very, very typical example of what we're seeing again and again and again and again. And I've been actually talking about this example for a long time, because it actually doesn't get old, even though the example has been around for quite a long time. And I'll show you a little bit later how it expands more. But what these guys have achieved is moving away from what the companies are typically doing, right? Which is what we call digitalization, which is they're taking their analog processes, turning them digital, but they're not fundamentally changing the process of how they're achieving their functions, right? But here, Nike, what they've done is they've really used the sensors, the apps, and the platforms to fundamentally transform their functions, right? What they've done is they've moved to the world in which they have fundamentally changed their R&D, fundamentally changed their marketing, doing it very, very differently, and stopping themselves from doing things they used to do in the past, which is very, very different from the way they've done things beforehand, right? Notice that from this diagram, we're nowhere close to being finished. This is just the beginning of a digital transformation journey. So what I want to do now is I want to show you a different example of this time a B2B company, a German and US-based company that many of you guys know. Bayer you probably know as a maker of aspirin. You also know them as a maker of a number of other pharmaceutical products, but they do also have a very, very big crop division, crop science. So if you went to the crop science division and asked them, what can you sell me, right, they would offer you rice and seeds, they would offer you pesticides, and they would offer you insecticides. If you think about it, again, one of those businesses where perhaps you don't need digital transformation. Having said that, you can also imagine that a lot of these products that are being sold here are not particularly sort of specialty products, they're commodity products, so subject to very, very low margins and, of course, very low growth. So what I want you to do is then watch another video of what Bayer has done in order to digitally transform its company.
Everyone is talking about the future of farming, but what about the future of your farm? Margins are getting thinner, and Mother Nature is as challenging as ever. It's great to talk about the next generation of farming technology, but how does that help you this season? You need something right now, a tool that turns your field data into insights, something that works the minute you turn it on. Climate Field View is that something. Our powerful agronomic platform is ready to help you manage your operation and improve profitability every season, but most importantly, this season. When planning ahead, FieldView analyzes last year's harvest data to create seed prescriptions for planting tailored to your specific field management zones, all helping you get the most out of every acre. Maximizing every acre starts with the FieldView Drive. Compatible with many makes and models of equipment, our drive sends data from your cab directly to your device to monitor crops. From planting to spraying to harvest, watch field data build in real time, giving you access to actionable insights in one easy-to-use platform. Field health imagery helps you spot crop disease and other stress early and often. This allows you to prioritize scouting, save and monitor regions, and take action to protect yield, saving you time and money. During harvest, our yield analysis tool helps evaluate performance by seed and soil type, so you can choose your most effective hybrids or varieties, perfectly suited to the variability of your fields. It's insights like these which can help you improve yield year over year. But even though we're invested in your farm this season, we're always looking ahead. Right now, we're developing new tools that will help you visualize fungicide applications to see what worked and what didn't. We're also introducing features to provide customized seed recommendations so you and your dealer can pick the best seed for each field. From planting to harvest and everything in between, FieldView delivers data you can use in the moment, all in one place.
So by now you probably recognized a number of very, very familiar elements, right? You must have seen sensors and sensors on the customer. In the Nike case, there was just one or maybe two. Here we have numerous, right? So one of the things that you probably have seen is how they're using satellite data and how they're using data from drones that are going over the fields. You probably also saw some references to some sensors that are the actual tractors and combines that are actually monitoring what's happening as the harvest is being collected, right? You probably also heard some references to some more interesting sensors, like sensors about temperature and rainfall, and most importantly, sensors which are descriptions of the actual ground that is being used for harvesting purposes, right? So one of the reasons why this was actually started is that the American government has created a really, really good database of all the arable land in the United States, which gives us, again, this ability to fundamentally understand how things get grown. On this basis, Bayer built a number of applications. Notice that these applications are super, super interesting, right? What they're doing is they're fundamentally helping their customers with their economics. They're fundamentally helping them to be more profitable, right? Which is very different from Nike. Nike sort of applications just gave you some motivation to do things better. Here we're seeing a profound difference in the helping the farmer to be more profitable. And if you meet any farmer, you know that farmers are never too happy about being profitable, not least because the weather conditions are always getting in the way of having a great harvest, right? And of course, last but not least, there is a platform element to it, and it comes in two different flavors. But the one that's most obvious here is the fact that, you know, a lot of what Bayer actually has created here is not on their own, right? So they only created a little machine, a little puck that sits inside of the cabin, collects all the information, but the actual sensors are sensors that are not owned by Bayer, and so as a consequence they're literally acting as a platform, integrating all of these sensor data into one coherent whole and using that for application. Notice that this is a very, very different business from what Nike has been doing, right? So Nike is simply, as I said, giving motivation. To here, we're actually giving people advice. So, you know, if we give people correct advice, they're super happy. But of course, if we give people incorrect advice, they're going to be super unhappy. So you really have to think about how you're going to use these data in order to give proper advice. And here we're sort of beginning to get into a deeper framework, because beforehand what you guys saw on this is the framework that we saw in Nike, and this is a framework we recommend to all companies to always invest money into building sensors, building apps, building platforms. But here we're also getting a little bit more deeper into business processes that are required to actually activate a digital strategy and turn it into something that's profoundly profitable, right? And so here what you're seeing is that all the data from the apps, the sensors and the platforms is being brought brought together, and then we're applying a bunch of models, right? And this is where all the analytics that you guys probably have been exposed to becomes extremely important, because what you need to do is you need to create models about how a particular piece of land is going to perform if you put enough fertilizer, if you put water, and these environmental conditions happen, and you put this particular seed versus another. And what you're going to do very carefully is you're going to give this advice to farmers, and of course initially you're going to give this to them for free, because let's face it, your models are not going to be very good. And then you're going to observe the outcome of these models to see how correct you were, right? And if you were correct, great, that means your models are perfect. But most of the time, your models will not be correct, and as a consequence, you're going to have to learn. And Bayer actually had to go through the circle about 3 to 4 times. And notice 3 to 4 times means actually here to 3 to 4 years, right? Because every time you actually have to wait for the harvest before you learn something, before they actually nailed something which, a model which kind of resembles the best agronomist out there. Which I think is quite impressive, actually, if you think about it, right? Notice that this loop, very often in this trendy new world that we live in, is called machine learning loop, right? Where you're taking the data, using for modeling, giving predictions, and testing the outcome of these predictions, and to see if your model is correct, and learning if the model is not correct, right? But here is a real business application of machine learning in the real world that actually creates revenue for your customers and for yourself, right? So you need to basically take what you've seen here, the sensors, the apps, and the platforms, and put them through this loop of continuous learning, of machine learning, ensuring that you have best-in-class modeling. And then what can you do with this? Well, you know, first of all, I told you that you're going to give this advice for free. But then what you can also do is then you can go deeper. You can start saying, I'm now going to charge you for the advice, right? And notice what a big difference it is from moving from the world in which you sold seeds to the world where you're actually fundamentally giving advice. One, it's a world which it's very hard to differentiate. The other one, which you have to invest a lot, but once you invest a lot, you're going to be able to give your farmers advice, your customers advice that nobody's going to be able to replicate easily. Second thing that you can do, which is very interesting, is that you can actually start investing in changing your business model, right? So normally what we do is we say, hey, listen, here's a product for you, here's how much it's going to cost. But now what we can do is actually get into the world of charging per outcomes, right? And normally it's very difficult to charge per outcomes. We would love to charge people for outcomes, right? If I give you advice that's worth $100,000 to you, you should be willing to pay $90,000 or even $99,000 to me. But because neither you nor I know that this advice is worth that much to you, neither of us will actually be willing to engage in that transaction. It will never happen, even though it should happen. But now we have sensors, now I have a way to measure how effective my advice has been to you. I can totally do this. And Bayer has been quite successfully introducing move to outcome-based pricing, which has created a tremendous amount of revenue for them, because of course, the more successful you are with the advice, the more people pay you, and then revenue goes up. The second thing that you can do is you can start thinking about how you're going to share your data with others. So here's an example of a very interesting company that you probably don't know. It's called Tillable. It comes from Chicago. And one really interesting thing about Tillable is it basically acts as an Airbnb, but for farms, right? So all of you guys are familiar with Airbnb, but maybe you're not familiar with Airbnb for farms, right? So you have farmers on the one side, and then on the other side you have people who are willing to rent farms. Many people own farms and don't want to work on them, so they sort of rent them out, particularly in the United States. But there is really no good, efficient market for valuing these farms, right? There is a typical problem that if I have a good farm, I can't persuade anybody that I have a good farm. Nobody trusts me I have a good farm, so basically I need some sort of verification that this farm is good in order to facilitate the transactions between people who are farmers and people who want to rent farms. And here's what Tillable kind of connected with Bayer very, very explicitly to actually use the data that comes out of the sensors, that comes out of the applications, that comes out of the models around this to say, here is how much this farm is worth, here is how much you should be willing to pay for this farm as a rental, right? So great use of information. Interestingly enough, this is one of those places where I invite you after this talk to do some research on your own. The deal between Tillabo and Bayer Crop Science actually fell apart, and didn't fall apart because it was a bad idea. It was actually a really brilliant idea, except the execution was not quite where it should be. So if any of the talks in this actually cover questions of execution, I invite you to spend as much time as possible listening, because execution is as important as strategy. But here I would just wanted to give you an example of how strategically you can share data and power those resources. And of course, if this was successful, this would have been great for Bayer, because they would give them access to new customers, would make the system even bigger, and more success will be had. So what do we see here? Do we see, again, something really, really interesting, right? We're seeing a company that's using apps, it's using sensors, it's using platforms, and it's not only using it to digitize its operations, which is what we see all the time people doing with limited success, right? Here we're seeing a company that moves even further than digital transformation of functions. It moves into digital transformation of business, where it fundamentally changes the way in which it makes money, right? And that's what we like about the digital strategies. We like something where we fundamentally make money very differently. And notice particularly in the Bayer example, what you're seeing is move from a very, very competitive world where you're basically in commodity chemicals to the world in which you give specialized advice, where the advice is so difficult to give, and very a few companies will be able to give it, that Bayer can expect to make sensible amounts of money out of this. So this is really important. Notice also the reason why I give you these two examples is that in order to be successful with digital strategy, you don't have to go all the way down to digital transformation of business, right? After all, Nike went only as far as digital transformation of functions, and they have been very, very successful, right? So you can totally stop there. And in the case, and the reason why Nike didn't go is, of course, the underlying market in shoes is still making a lot of money. No point for them to go into digital transformation of business. Having said that, if you can move further and start thinking about making money differently, particularly out of advisory services for your customers, we recommend thinking about this. So I'll leave you with this. I'll leave you this is a menu of choices, and remind you that the model that we introduced at the very beginning is still going to be extremely helpful, hopefully, for many of you. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. You can find me on LinkedIn, where I invite you to reach out, and I'll be very happy to answer any questions that you might have.